are you doing? Welcome to this live edition of Ask the Service Provider. I am your host, Clem Herod, and we are joined today by Patrick Murtha, a CPA with the firm Murtha and Murtha. Patrick has been a great resource for us, sharing his insights weekly with the Ask the Service Provider platform and information group. Thank you for joining us, Patrick.
Thanks, Clem. Always fun being here.
Yeah, man. Yeah. So, I know last week we went over some things and we were discussing what's going on with the economy, going on with the CARES Act, going on with the relief packages, the stimulus programs, and now we are dealing with some updates. What do you have for us?
Yeah, so we kind of ended our segment last week with kind of a teaser. I think the night before at the daily coronavirus press conference that the president does, and Fauci and everybody, they discussed they kind of launched some guidelines on when and how we're going to start opening up the economy in this kind of 3-phase thing. And we kind of learned more this week that the authority is kind of being handed to the governors of each state in order to decide. Each governor is going to be able to decide on their own when it's appropriate to open up the economy, which makes a lot of sense because not every state is going to be ready, not only because every state is dealing with varying levels of the pandemic, but also varying states have different kind of ideologies and philosophies on what's appropriate and what's not, and when is the right time and when isn't.
Right.
And we're not really here to discuss the political aspects of when we should open up and why and that kind of thing. But what we want to talk about is how important it is as business owners, all of us, to look at our state and look at our governors and how are they planning on rolling out the economy and how is that going to impact your business. So a lot of people that are members of CLEMCO HR and everything are people that run their own business that are also relying on sporting events and other live venue type events for their income. And obviously that's largely or completely shut down right now. So it's going to be really important to look at your state to see when are these things going to start opening up, when are conferences and meetings and other events, corporate events, going to start opening up if that's what you do, when are sporting events going to start opening up, are they going to be doing the events without fans? Are they going to allow press at the events? Those kinds of things.
Right.
That's all going to start at the state and governor level, and all of that's going to impact your budget that you should have, that you should be working on. That's part of what we talked about last week, is having a budget in place for your business. That's kind of planning how things are going to go during this whole situation and as it unfolds. Looking at your state and your governor and how they're opening things up, that should help shape your expectations for the future. It should help you understand and be able to predict a little bit better. Is this something I'm gonna have to deal with for another month or two, or is it something I have to deal with another 6 months? And that's going to depend on a lot on where you are and what state you're in.
Well, and you mentioned that as far as like the governors kind of having control of that, but then thinking about the larger bodies and the larger entities as well, and who's going to make that first move, right? So, yes, sports, but opening up, that's still on a larger scale. That is the different organizations like the NBA, like NCAA, the NFL, NHL, baseball, MLB. Some of those bodies, they're meeting and trying to decide, because if one opens up, then how is that going to affect the other one? Or say a conference or a convention, which large business is going to do it first? There's the virtual aspect of it, which we are doing a virtual
right.
meeting and sharing that information. There's so many other people doing that as well. But it's where are we going? That pace, the funding coming in, who gets the funding first? Those are some of the things that we talked about. So, and I know one of the hot topics was the larger businesses getting that
right.
funding before the small businesses. The SBA, the Small Business Association, thinking about how those rules were set up, and here you have companies, for example, Ruth's Chris, getting a lot of funding before some of these small businesses. How does something like that happen?
Right. So regarding the Paycheck Protection Program that the SBA did, that's a lot of what we've been talking about because it is the biggest piece of the business stimulus that's going out so far, and it is by far the most complicated of the programs that have been put out. Yeah, the issue is, if anybody hasn't been reading the news or looking at your Facebook, there's been a lot of larger companies that definitely are not classically a small business, as the Small Business Administration would typically consider them. Ruth's Chris is the example used, and there's been several others as well, but they're kind of the most notorious right now. The way that it works is the SBA considers a small business any company that's under 500 employees. Ruth's Chris has many more than that, but they put a special provision in for restaurants that says that 500 employee provision is based on location, not based on the total enterprise. So Ruth's Chris may have 100 locations around the country, or 50 or whatever it is, that have several hundred employees at each location. As long as each location's under 500, they're eligible for the loan. And because they operate under two subsidiaries, they were actually able to max out the loan twice and get 20 million, because the maximum for any one company is 10 million. They're actually able to get 20 million. A lot of people looked at that and said, this is clearly a publicly traded company. I think they're publicly traded, taking advantage of this provision, which, that's kind of more of an opinion kind of piece. Since they've gotten so much backlash, I believe they've announced, I think today, that they're going to be returning the money, because they don't, they're saying they don't need it. So yeah, and that kind of brings to light the issue. A lot of my clients that tend to be on, definitely the smaller side of what's considered a small business, most of my clients are going to be, anywhere from independent contractors that are working for themselves, up to, maybe under 100 employees. That's kind of the general range that we're in. So we're definitely working with the people that should be getting these loans. And what we found, what I believe, is that a lot of these banks, they prioritize their bigger customers because those customers are more lucrative to them in a lot of ways than smaller customers. And also they may have debt that it's owed to them from these larger clients that's going to be more significant. So they actually have more of a vested interest in keeping these larger companies afloat than, say, an independent contractor who has a bank account and a credit card and that's it. So it seems that although the SBA dictated in the original CARES Act that it would be a first come, first served basis, and that it would not be based on relationships, and it would not be based on, size of the company, it seems that definitely there are a lot of banks that applied that rule, inconsistently and unfairly. And some of the larger banks like Wells Fargo and Chase are being accused of shuffling paper, meaning that they would essentially take, if you were first in line with your small business, but a much larger company came behind you, they would kind of deprioritize your application and prioritize the larger company's application. So unfortunately, an unintended consequence of this whole thing has been that the PPP loan has been more about how big you are and who you know, more so than it has been applied fairly.
Right. And with that as well, it's like, when the announcement was made about the government putting forth these funds to help businesses, I mean, I think everybody applied. Anybody that could possibly get some form of funding applied, right? So now, is it really the fault of the company that just applied because they're trying to think about their employees and protecting their employees because it was closed, because their doors are closed and they're trying to navigate all this? Good for them for giving the money back, but should we really look down upon them for just accepting, or not even really accepting it, just being notified that they receive funds?
Right. Well, I mean, you got to look at each, and I've had a few conversations with some friends of mine, about this, and it's like, if you are a company, if you own a business and you have shareholders, your job isn't to do anything other than create value for yourself and your shareholders, right? So and to protect your interests. So protecting your interests means keeping your employees on payroll and keeping them happy. You can't really blame Ruth's Chris for taking advantage of the money that was available, because that's what they did. Then they got a bunch of bad publicity, and they determined, you know what, the bad publicity is going to be more expensive than the 20 million.
Exactly.
So let's return the 20 million. But at the end of the day, if they're going to get the loan forgiven, then they're going to have to pay it out to employees. And if they're going to pay it out to employees, then that means you have a bunch of out of work restaurant workers that are getting paid. And that can't be a bad thing, because at the end of the day, now you have a bunch of people that are, many of whom are probably paycheck to paycheck people that are now getting some income. That if that's what they were using the loan for, then I don't think I personally don't think there's a problem with it. But if they're now, the way that the PPP loan works is, if you don't use the loan for specific business expenses like payroll, then you have to pay it back, which sounds bad, but this is like a 1.5% loan. So it's a very low interest loan that's very easy to get. So any large business that uses a lot of debt, which most large businesses do, they're gonna take advantage of that situation just to get cheap debt.
Right. Well, that's one thing as well that we kind of talked about before. So there is like I have a line of credit. My business has a line of credit, but
right.
If for the PPP or the EIDL, if that interest rate is lower and I'm approved, then it may be better for me to go that route as opposed to looking at my line of credit, which would be, whatever prime is plus.
Yeah, it's going to be a higher rate more than likely.
Yes.
So yeah, I mean, and I think that's a fair use of the EIDL loan. The PPP loan is really more based on payroll. So they designed it to be a payroll loan. And unfortunately, because they've moved so quickly, there hasn't really been any guidance more than what was originally published in the CARES Act, which describes in great detail the amount that's forgivable and in great detail how those amounts are determined. But there could certainly be more guidance issued by the SBA that states, that may limit how much is forgivable based on additional parameters. Perhaps they may come in and say, if we determine that you didn't actually need the loan in the long run, then you may have to repay it. Or if we determine, they have said very clearly that if you take out any of these loans and use it for personal gain rather than for business purposes, then that's considered fraud. And they say that they will pursue those cases. So yeah, I mean, I think using it to keep your business going is what it's there for. And I think if you have a credit line that's a higher interest and this is a lower interest rate, I think it's a fair use of that. I think it's a fair use of this loan to finance your business with as low interest rate as possible, because when you got your line of credit, you probably weren't thinking, hey, if there is an apocalypse, at least I have this line of credit. You probably got it because you wanted to have capital available in case opportunities came up and good investments came up and that kind of thing. This is a different situation. So I think that these disaster loans are appropriate for that.
So, I want to encourage all people viewing to use the different chat features in Zoom if you've called in, or Facebook Live, because we're streaming there as well. And we're looking to have that interaction, engagement, and be able to have some of your questions answered as well. I know from my perspective, my wife is a business owner, has 40 plus employees. Me being a solopreneur, managing my business, it's like in this household, seeing so many different aspects of that. And this morning I received the notification that I got my EIDL advance. So that was a nice little W in the win category. It's a small W, but because the funding was small, but hey, it's something, right? It's something to kind of see that this process is working. And so now with that, just thinking about, okay, that was that funding. And recently I saw that my county has funding options as well, or a grant was available. And so I applied for that. And during the process of applying, you and I discussed this, I see that I was supposed to register my business with my county. Yes, I'm registered with the federal government. Yes, I'm registered with the state, but I had no idea to register with the county.
Right. So yeah, that's definitely something we've noticed with all of these loan programs, and just real quick to point out, your county, which is also my county, yes, they are offering, through a local business nonprofit, they are administering a grant for small businesses that is really going to help out a lot of businesses. So definitely, just a sidebar, keep your eyes open for opportunities like that. And Gail asked if these grants can be found at the city level too, possibly. And that's what we're saying is, do your research and see what's available. There certainly could be city grants. There could be county grants. There could be other, not-for-profit organizations like chambers of commerce and that kind of thing that are offering grant money that you just have to apply, and you may be able to get it. And it could get you through some tough times here. So it's definitely something to just be vigilant and keep an eye on. So this particular grant that Clem you're referring to here, they required kind of some basic kind of housekeeping type stuff to be in order. So it's based specifically in your county. So they wanted basically they want to make sure that only county residents and county businesses are getting it. So your business needs to be in the county and your residence needs to be in the county. So as such, they're requiring not only your driver's license to show that you are a resident of the county, but they also want to see that you are registered, your business is registered with the county. And most counties, at least here in Florida, have what's called a tax receipt that you would file with your local county office, your local county tax collector. I think in Pasco, where we are, it's like $13. So it's not an expensive thing. But it's a technicality that you need to have that in order to apply for this grant, because they want to make sure that everybody's doing things the way that they need to. So we've learned, through this whole process that business owners that are keeping their documentation and their housekeeping stuff, like these registrations and their licenses and their accounting and their taxes, they're keeping all these things up to date and current, are enjoying that benefit right now of being able to kind of breeze through these processes without any issues. The clients that I've talked to, that I've had, who are getting declined or, having issues with their bank for even the PPP loan, are the ones that don't have their documents together, that always wait till the last minute for stuff. And, now they're in a situation where everybody who waited for last minute needs it all at once, and they're having a hard time getting the work done and getting what they need. So it's definitely a case for staying on top of that, and definitely a case for researching your locality, whatever state you're in, whatever county you're in, whatever city you're in, making sure that you have the right permit or the right license for that state, city, and county. Here in Florida, in Pasco County, you need to be registered on through the state of Florida, which you do on sunbiz.org, and you need to be registered with Pasco County, which every Florida county has that same requirement. You can go to the county tax collector and become registered.
So we see that John Brewer has asked a couple of questions as far as like filing 2019 taxes to be eligible for PPP and EIDL.
So no, the EIDL and the PPP neither have it as a requirement at the SBA level for you to have your 2019 filed. Now on the bank level, some banks I've had that do request that. I don't think I've had any that require it. I've had several that have requested it, and if it wasn't filed yet, they would go with 28. They would take a copy of 2018, and you would need to provide, whatever they request for 2019. But the PPP loan specifically is based on payroll, and generally whatever evidence that they request for payroll is all that they need. The EIDL, that loan does not require 2019 to be filed. I think that's made pretty clear right on the website that you file the application through the SBA.
Nice. And then you see the other question here.
I do. So is it true, John Brewer asks, is it true that non-conventional lenders like PayPal are a much better route for small business in terms of probably actually prioritized over larger businesses? I haven't specifically heard that, but it's definitely, in my personal experience with my clients, I found that smaller banks. Now, I know there are a lot of other lenders like PayPal, like Cabbage.
I think QuickBooks has something going on.
I think QuickBooks has one through Intuit that you can do. I don't know about those non-conventional lenders. I haven't heard anything specifically about them, but I can tell you that basically the smaller the bank, the quicker it moved for a lot of my clients. Yeah, because I have clients that already had their money in the bank with their small local bank before Chase even sent the email out saying, "Hey, we're ready to apply."
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely the smaller banks and the non-conventional. I would bet that the non-conventional lenders are going to be better as well, and I would try to find the smaller of them. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And go to them. There's a lot of them out there. A lot of these small business lenders that do short-term working capital loans and merchant service loans. They pretty much are all doing it, and you could probably do your own research and find some good ones.
Right. Now, the government's talking about putting out some additional funds.
Right.
It was, what did we say? 310 billion, somewhere around that number. What are your thoughts? Where are we going on that?
Yeah, so my understanding is the House has passed the 310 billion more to go to the PPP loan program. I would expect that to pass pretty quickly here, and it seems like a lot of banks are reopening their lending process. So in anticipation of more money being unlocked. So right now, if you haven't already submitted your application, you may want to consider doing it if you think you're eligible and that PPP program could be useful for you, because banks are starting to move forward with the assumption that more money is going to become unlocked. And I wouldn't be surprised if that additional money that was released doesn't, also runs out pretty quickly. So you definitely want to get online as soon as you can.
Right, because a lot of people do already have their applications in, and more people submitting applications, and now there's that line, that waiting list, if you will, of people just trying to get that support, trying to get that aid. So thank you for all of your questions in Zoom here, even on Facebook. Yes, there are the aspects of things slowly opening up. That's going to be a process of trying to see how things are going to develop, what is going on. This is all uncharted territory, like people have said, and like we've said on several occasions. People are doing their best to navigate it, and at the end of the day, I have to believe and think that the government and the senators and everyone involved, the representatives, are just trying to do what's best as well and navigate this uncharted territory.
Exactly.
Yeah. So again, Patrick, thank you so much for taking your time to come and do this with us. We will be back here next Friday, 1 p.m. Ask the Service Provider, sponsored by CLEMCO HR, Patrick Murtha, and we're just trying to provide that information and provide those resources to help you project the best image possible.
Exactly. Well, thanks for having us, Clem, and looking forward to seeing what happens next week so we can, have some crazy updates.
Yeah. All right. Have a great one.
Take care.